Today I'm going to complete the bases on my first 40k Killteam of Elucidian Starstriders, as well as review Vallejo's Dust and Dirt pigment set that I recently purchased. Before I get to the pigments, I'll do a quick recap of everything that was done for the bases, starting with an application of AK Interactive's concrete texture paste. While the concrete is still wet, I add some large rocks with a drop of superglue and sprinkle in a few smaller ones and press these down into the paste, as well as add some tufts. All was then primed black, followed by a zenithal spray of white ink in the early stages of painting the miniatures. A coat of Army Painter's Fire Drake was then applied to the bases, rocks, and the tufts. After what felt like an eternity of painting the miniatures to a finished state, I finally returned to the bases, doing a rough dry brush of a mustard yellow over the rocks, ground, and tufts. I add an additional tone of dry brushed red, but I only add this from the miniature's right to left, or from their perspective. When doing this, I wasn't intending for this to be representative of a light source, but rather that the wind in this place mainly blows from the same direction, much like where I live, where the vast majority of storms come from the southwest, and blown dust and debris is usually found on the same faces of trees and buildings. I next hit the rims with black, which is always satisfying for me as this usually means I'm close to being done with the project. Now I'm ready to apply the Vallejo pigment powders from the Dust and Dirt set. I was originally only going to use 3 of these, but then I decided why the hell not try all 4 and see what happens. To be fair, I initially expected this to work and feel exactly the same as when I used chalk scrapings in previous projects. But immediately after pouring out some of the black pigment, I noticed how much of a finer grain this was. I was shocked at how easily this falls from the brush into place, to the point where if I wanted to control it more, I'd have to use a finer tip brush. I also thought the black would be a little too dark, but it added immediate depth and there was no regrets. Another unexpected behavior is when tapping off the excess. Very little actually came off the miniature, where I expected to lose most of what was applied. As I move on to the second color, I applied this in the same manner, but aiming to overlap the areas between the black pigments and where there were no pigments applied. My experience with the burnt umber was the same as with the iron oxide. Moving on to the yellow ochre pigment, I applied this one differently. In the booklet it mentions mixing pigment binder or airbrush thinner to get different effects, but I don't have the pigment binder. I do, however, have airbrush thinner, so I figured I'd give it a shot just to see how it behaves. I dab a little thinner directly onto the rocks before tapping in some of the ochre pigment. It instantly becomes a muddy sludge on contact. The effect is something I'd really like to see with the burnt umber or iron oxide on future projects, as I'd expect its use for vehicles or burnt or grungy effects will have great results. For the final pigment, this was the only one that let me down a little, but more so I think the way it behaves versus what I wanted it to do were two different things. My hope was to be able to brush it on, then gently smudge away the excess to create a layer of caked dust. This is something that the chalk shavings I've used in the past is able to do very well. However, the Desert Dust pigment powder was very clumpy in comparison, and it falls away from the base a lot more than the others did. This may have been one of the pigments I should have also combined with airbrush thinner for a better application. Or maybe cutting in some of that binder would have offered a more appealing experience. I'm not writing the Desert Dust pigment off, I just don't think the way I tried to use it here is the best way to utilize it. And here's a final look at the Elucidian Starstriders kill team before I finally call this project 100% complete. I'm happy enough with the simple bases as I wanted a boring and barren wasteland appearance and purposely made their gear and clothing very non-grimdark, which is kind of the exact opposite of what one would typically expect in the world of 40k. The idea I had is that the Lucia Vane is a spoiled rogue trader who has vast resources and has spent her fortunes on her team's appearances. Everything is shiny and new, and that the team is less function where you'd expect it. This idea was influenced by what I feel is a team of obvious non-soldier types. The Voidsman with the long braid of hair, the other one smoking, and the third being overweight. Only the heavy gunner and Voidmaster look professional. This led into part of what I imagine is the team's backstory, with the spoiled rich rogue trader having brought her underachieving brother in, the Voidsman with the long hair, and the Voidmaster being a decorated war hero forced into this position by the rogue trader's power. And now, their vessel having crash landed on a desolate planet with hidden dangers will need all able bodies at full attention. Only they don't have those able bodies. They have a bunch of scrubs dressed up like soldiers. Can the Voidmaster pull these men and women into a cohesive fighting force? All while the rogue trader is only concerned with the wind-whipped dust staining the expensive fabric of their clothing that's fit for the High Lords of Terra. And with that, it's time to bring this video to its end. I hope you learned something or were inspired to start or expand your own collection of motley melanges of meandering miscreants. If you have any questions, feel free to ask, and if you like the content of this video and would like to see more, you can easily support the channel by liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing. I'm Jim with Working with Miniatures. I'm truly grateful for your time, and I bid you a fond farewell. Until the next video.